Hello footy fans, welcome to another episode of Bev's Footy Tips. This episode for round 18 of the 2022 AFL season. Round 17 was another ripper-dipper round, so let's hope for more of the same in round 18. And don't forget, the top 8 is still not set just yet. There is still a door open for some of those teams outside the 8, which makes the remaining rounds very, very exciting. Anyway, let's begin with the round 17 winner of the Bev Show tipping comp, and it's a big congratulations to J Goats 1 for Josh. This individual put on a clinic by correctly guessing 9 out of the 9 matches correct. Whoa, you beauty to you, Josh. You ripper-dipper superstar. Well done to you. A round of applause. Gee, I thought there was some tricky games during round 17, but you nailed it to perfection. And this is how the overall leaderboard looks after 17 rounds of footy. Cats fan 17 has taken the lead with 105 total tips. The previous leader, Prouthouse, has dropped to second, but he's on the same amount of total tips as the leader, as well as P. Cripps Bro for Damien, also on 105 total tips. And then Scotty Ayres in 4th, Hayden Burke in 5th, Cade Fagan in 6th. All those tipsters on 104 total tips. Now, I don't really want to do this, but we've got to look back at how many tips I got right and wrong in round 17, starting with the D's and the Cats. I tipped the D's in that one. I tipped the Doggies over Sydney. Tough Friday night at the office for not only the players, but also the Doggies fans as well. Very disappointing performance from the Dogs last Friday night. I tipped Collingwood over North Melbourne. I tipped Richmond over Gold Coast. A kick after the siren cost me getting that tip right, which is frustrating as it gets. I tipped Fremantle over St Kilda. Pretty happy with that one. I tipped Port Adelaide over GWS. I tipped Brisbane over Essendon. I tipped Hawthorn over Adelaide. And I tipped Carlton over West Coast in the final game of the round. So a pretty poor round of tipping from me. Just the 5 matches correct out of 9 brings me to a total of 98 tips. This round just gone has set me back a lot. So I've got a bit of ground to make up in round 18. And that's exactly what I'll be trying to do. Let's get into my round 18 tips. Round 18 gets underway on Friday night. Yes, no Thursday night footy, unfortunately, for the rest of the home and away season at least. But this is an interesting game to kick off round 18. It's the Western Bulldogs taking on St Kilda at Marlboro Stadium. 7:50 p.m. start time. Both these teams trying to get inside the 8. It's 10th v 9th. St Kilda outside the 8 on percentage. The Dogs, they're a game outside the 8. Both teams coming off losses in the previous round. St Kilda went down to Fremantle by 41 points in a game where they dominated the first half, but then the Dockers turned things around in the second half and ran away dominant winners in the end. St Kilda have lost 4 of their last 5 games now. The Dogs, they lost to the Swans last Friday night by 53 points in a game where they just didn't show up. It was an un-Bulldog-like performance, if you ask me. It was very disappointing. They were dominated in all areas, and their defence at the moment is pretty much one of the worst defences or backlines in the competition, which begs the question, does the Dogs coaching staff roll the dice and swing Aaron Naughton into the backline, at least for the short term, just to stop the leakage of goals and just to maybe give the Dogs a chance of sneaking into finals? Although then again, Aaron Naughton might not even play this Friday night. He is under an injury cloud. The Dogs might bring back Josh Bruce from a long-term injury. Toby McLean's in the mix to come back. Of course, Bailey Smith will come back this week. I'm sure St Kilda will make a change or two as well for the game on Friday night. This game could go either way. We know St Kilda can win this game and make the finals at their best. I think their best is good enough. But I'm obviously going to back in my Dogs, boys. It was disappointing last Friday night, but I just feel back under the roof at Marvel Stadium. They play their best footy at Marvel Stadium. I'm going to back them in to get the job done. Now, I suck at margins this year, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use my margin ticket to decide my margin for this game. So let's take a look. 39 points. So there you go. I'm going to tip the Dogs by 39 points, although I do think that the game will be a lot closer than that. The first of many Saturday games, it's the Adelaide Crows taking on Collingwood at the Adelaide Oval. This game getting underway at 1:45 p.m. I thought the Crows were really disappointing in the way they lost to Hawthorn last weekend. I gave them a chance to win that game, but Hawthorn proved too good, too dominant, and beat the Crows by 32 points. They're taking on a Collingwood team who, well, they beat North Melbourne only by 7 points last weekend. North Melbourne, I think, were the better team for a majority in that game, but what I liked about Collingwood is they found a way. They weren't at their best, but they found a way to run over the top of North Melbourne late and win that game and bag the 4 points. Collingwood have won 7 in a row now. They're absolutely flying. Wouldn't be surprised if the Crows cause an upset in this one, given it's at the Adelaide Oval. But Collingwood, they've beaten the Crows already this season. It was by 42 points at the MCG in round 2. Of course, that was the game where the fire alarm went off. So I do back Collingwood in to make it 8 wins in a row. The other 1:45 Saturday afternoon game is the Greater Western Sydney Giants taking on the Brisbane Lions at Canberra Oval. Interesting game, this one. Both teams coming off losses in the previous round. GWS were disappointing against Port Adelaide last Saturday night. They went down by 55 points in a game where they only scored 3 goals and 11 behinds. They're taking on Brisbane, who lost to Essendon last weekend by 10 points. They were missing 9 of their best 22 players. Whether that was an excuse or not, I'll let you guys decide. I personally think if you're missing that many players from your starting team, then it's bound to affect your team in some way. But then Essendon were missing players as well, and Brisbane did have the chance to win that game, but blew it over the concluding stages. I would expect Brisbane to get a few players back, such as Zorko and Rich and possibly a couple of others. These two teams have already met this season. They met back in round 11, and it was Brisbane only winning by 14 points in a high-scoring game. I think Brisbane conceded about 90-plus points in that game, but they were able to do enough to win. I do think Brisbane are the better team, though, out of the two. So I'm going to back Brisbane in. Gee, if they lose this one, well, all of a sudden, top 4 is in doubt for Brisbane. The 4:35 p.m. Saturday game is at Marvel Stadium. It's North Melbourne taking on Richmond. It's been a tough week for North Melbourne. Of course, losing their coach, David Noble, who resigned only yesterday. Lee Adams will take over as the interim coach. Although going back to their performance against Collingwood last weekend, it was a pretty gallant performance. I think North Melbourne deserved to win that game. They were the better team throughout. But as I mentioned, Collingwood found a way over the concluding stages to win by a narrow margin. They're taking on a Richmond team who have just kicked themselves in the foot so many times this season. They were 40 points up against Gold Coast last weekend, blew the lead and lost the game after the siren. And then you look at games against Sydney, they had a big lead in that one. Again, blew a big lead, lost the game. They were 17 points up against Geelong a few weeks ago, went on to lose that game by a narrow margin. They just keep blowing big leads, the Tigers. If they had have won all those 3 games that I mentioned, they'd be inside the 4 at the moment. But right now, they're only inside the 8 due to percentage, and they're not a lock to make the 8 with the way that they are going. So, look, I do expect Richmond, though, to bounce back against North Melbourne on Saturday. They should be too good for the Kangas. 2 ripping Saturday night matches, and the first of them is at the MCG, 7:25 p.m. start time. It is Carlton taking on Geelong. This should be an interesting game of footy. Of course, both teams inside the 8 as I speak. Both teams coming into this off the back of wins in the previous round. The Cats have won their last 7 games, and they beat Melbourne last Thursday night by 28 points in a game where they were very dominant, it's fair to say. Carlton, well, they won by 63 points over there in the West against West Coast. They kept West Coast goalless, in fact scoreless in the first quarter, kicked 5-4 in that opening term, but then conceded 7 goals, 3 in the second quarter. But then they were able to run away with it in the second half and win. I think Geelong are the better team. So I'm tipping the Cats, but I'm expecting a good game of footy. I'm expecting the Blues to take it right up to the Cats, but the Cats, I think, will be a little too strong. The other Saturday night match is a beauty. 7:30 p.m. start time, Optus Stadium, Fremantle taking on Sydney. Both teams in the 8. Both teams coming off big wins in the previous round. As I mentioned earlier, Freo knocked off St Kilda by 41 points away from home, and Sydney smashed the Dogs by 53 points. Interesting game, this one. I think it could go either way. The Dockers, they've won 3 of the last 5 games against the Swans, and those 3 games that they've won in the last 5 matches between these two teams, all at Optus Stadium. I think if it was at the SCG, I might be tempted to tip the Swans, but given it's at Optus Stadium, I'm tipping the Dockers. I'm backing them in. I think they're the better team anyway, but should be a good game. It's going to have to be split screen on Saturday night because these 2 games on Saturday night are rippers. The first of 3 Sunday matches at the MCG. Hawthorn taking on West Coast. This game getting underway at 1:10 p.m. Should be an interesting game, this. Of course, Hawthorn coming in to this game off the back of a very good win over Adelaide. 32-point winners at Marvel Stadium. And they're taking on a West Coast team who have only won 2 matches this season, but have been competitive since the bye. Of course, they really took it up to the Cats. They really took it up to the Tigers 2 weeks ago at the MCG. Last week was slightly disappointing. Scoreless in the first quarter, but then kicked 7 goals in the second quarter. And then were thereabouts in the third quarter, but the fourth quarter, well, they were pretty disappointing. I think they were kept goalless in the the fourth quarter as well. They were kept scoreless in the fourth quarter, in fact. So a bit of a mixed bag performance from the Eagles against Carlton last week, but they were up against a pretty good Carlton team. You know what? I'm going to tip an upset in this one. I know only 6% have gone the Eagles, but I'm tipping the Eagles in an upset. Yeah, I'm feeling an upset for some reason. I just, in my gut, feel West Coast can win this game. No offence to Hawthorn. They deserve to be favourites in this match, and they're the team to beat out of the 2. But I think West Coast can take it right up to the Hawks, and I think they're a chance of winning, and I need to tip an upset in this round to try and make up some ground, so I'm going to back the Eagles in. The mid-Sunday afternoon match is at TIO Traeger Park in Alice Springs, which should be very interesting viewing. It's Melbourne taking on Port Adelaide, 3:20 p.m. start time. Should be an interesting game. Melbourne were very disappointing against Geelong last Thursday night, I thought. They were 28-point losers in the end. Geelong really denied Melbourne the ability to move the ball effectively. They were dominated in the clearance battle, and they found it really hard to get it out of the defensive 50 when Geelong got it in there. That was also something that Geelong did very well on the night. Their forward line is an issue as well, the Ds, I think. They're missing Tom McDonald. Ben Brown's been disappointing this season. Bailey Fritsch, I mean, he's their leading goal kicker, so, he's done his very best, but I think they need something else in that forward line, the Ds, because right now, I think for mine, it's a bit shaky. They're taking on Port Adelaide, who recorded a good win against GWS last Saturday night. Of course, Port Adelaide still trying to get themselves in the 8. They're currently a couple of games outside of, in fact, a game outside the 8 to be more specific. But I'm tipping Melbourne in this one. And the final game of the round is an absolute blinder. Essendon taking on the Gold Coast Suns at Marvel Stadium, 4:40 p.m. start time. Both teams in good form. Essendon have won 3 of their last 4 games, so they've won a few games in the last 4 weeks, and they're taking on a Gold Coast team who recorded an outstanding come-from-behind win over Richmond last weekend, and they're trying to get themselves in the 8th, the Suns, and they need to win this if they're going to make the finals, I think, which is why I'm going to back them in. I think their hunger, their fight is just so gutsy, and it's taking them a long way this season, and I think it will take them a long way in this game. So I'm backing the Suns over the Bombers. Not confident with that tip at all, though. So recapping my round 18 tips, I've tipped the Dogs by 39 points. I've tipped Collingwood, Brisbane, Richmond, Geelong, Fremantle, West Coast, Melbourne, and the Gold Coast Suns. And there you go, footy fans. That's another episode of Bev's Footy Tips done and dusted for round 18 of the 2022 AFL season. Do hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, give it a thumbs up, comment down below, and also press that subscribe button. Would really appreciate all of that. Until next time, enjoy round 18. Bye for now. And go the Doggies! Please bounce back against St Kilda. Pretty please.